Okay, hi everyone. I'm Alexis Williams, founder of Business Skills for Health Professionals, and welcome to our Beyond Clinical podcast. I'll be interviewing health professionals from diverse backgrounds who've moved into unconventional roles beyond clinical. We'll be hearing their stories and tips, and I hope that this inspires you to pursue unique career paths. Very excited. Today is our 10th episode of the podcast, and I'd like to introduce my guest, Gabrielle Giuliano. Gabrielle, please say hello to our audience.
Hi, hello everyone.
Awesome. So I'd love to share a little bit about Gabrielle's background. She's a registered dietitian with her master's, working in the food manufacturing industry since 2016, managing regulatory affairs for numerous products in dairy, plant-based, and medical food brands. She's also the founder of Happyeating RD, a blog exploring relationships with food, diet culture, and all things nutrition. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to jump right into the questions.
Sure.
So starting off with just something a little bit fun, is there something that you're excited about for the next few months or the upcoming time?
Yeah, so actually not work related, but we are expecting our second son. Um
Ooh.
okay, so getting ready to jump back into boy mom mode times two.
Oh,
So it's
fun.
exciting. Definitely comes up way faster the second time around than the first.
Oh,
But
totally.
but yeah,
How,
so yeah,
how old is your first son?
he's 1.5.
Okay, yeah. I feel like I was where you were exactly about 7 years
Uh,
ago. I have two sons that are 2 years apart. So
oh,
they're
nice.
7 and 9 now. It goes quick, as people will probably
Yeah.
say, but oh, that's so exciting. Well, I wish you a good end to your rest of your pregnancy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your career path and your journey, and how you kind of got into the area that you're in as a health professional.
Sure, absolutely. So I would consider myself like one of those a non-traditional RD, where I went and did my bachelor's not in nutrition or dietetics, and then I went back to get my DPD, and started in clinical, and always knew that I enjoyed it. My experience there was like very eye-opening, but I knew it was never where I wanted to be long term. So I worked both in acute care and in outpatient care, doing clinical medical nutrition therapy. And then I had an opportunity to work at a food company doing what they call regulatory affairs. And at the time, I'll admit I didn't fully know what it was. I just knew like, oh, okay, I'm going to be the person who does the food labels, essentially, very, very high level. And it definitely was going to be a departure from what I was doing today, but I was open to that. So I went ahead and took the role in 2016, and I've been doing it ever since. It's been a real fun transition and journey into, of course, some parts of it are still nutrition related, like a day in life. I would review fact panels. I would create fact panels with the research and development team, making sure we're meeting the right claims. Like, let's say, like the marketing team would be like, we want to call this a good source of vitamin D. Like, we would
Mhm.
work to make sure we meet all that criteria. Checking fact panels, as I said, making sure everything's correct. Ingredients, making sure ingredients are compliant for sale in the US. Um, those kind of things. And also to working with marketing very directly on nutrition claims and nutrition messaging, which
Mhm.
is one of my more favorite parts of the job. Like, we'll review social content, we'll review any content really that our brands are putting out, just to make sure that it is truthful, not misleading, because that's what we follow under the FDA guidance, to make sure that we are being transparent about the products we sell, and also just finding like nutrition, like ways to fill in the nutrition piece of it too, which is
Mhm.
really. We also manage like certifications, like things like organic, non-GMO Project Verified. Like those are two that I see a lot. So we do those kind of things as well, but it's a very cross-functional role. You work with, as I said, the research and development, the marketing teams, the quality teams. It's really fun. It's really fun to like, in a way, to bring nutrition to folks without doing clinical care.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's so neat. I spent a
Mm.
lot of time working in retail myself and
Yeah.
worked very closely with our regulatory team at the
Mhm.
retailer because similar to what you were saying, like we were making a lot of doing a lot of social media, a lot of promotion around like what the dietitians wanted to promote about certain foods. And we always wanted to make sure that, you know, what we were saying was compliant with what you're kind of allowed to say. I'm in Canada, so it was the CFIA here, the Canadian Food
Yes.
Inspection Agency. But yeah, such a valuable resource for companies to have a strong regulatory team, I think. So I think that's really cool that that's the space that you're in. And I see a lot of opportunity for dietitians in that space, especially
Yes.
those that are detail oriented and good at kind of research and looking at like, did you find those were things that you've used a lot of your skills in to be good in regulatory?
Yes, being rooted in the science is like was a definitely transferable skill. You need to know the nutrition. It's just having that background is so helpful. Even when you are looking at like a fact panel and you're just like, oh, something looks a little off. Like you know, a certain product probably has a certain threshold of nutrients and something's coming in wrong. But also too, in terms of like looking at marketing materials and retail
Mm-hmm.
materials. To your point, like we don't want to like you don't want to oversell something when you know from a nutrition standpoint that it's not it's more of an over promise or under promise than like you just know the
Yeah,
science and
right.
transferring that science and interpret science is really, I would say, the biggest part of that, and still knowing how to interpret now instead to a patient or a client, you're interpreting it to the business. So that's
Mm-hmm.
definitely transferable, and even in general, the people skills, because it's again learn it once you can learn how to talk to a patient, talk to a client, understand all the nuance there. It's really more just moving that into like a business mindset and being like, okay, I'm here to support the business I work for. So how can I translate and come across with the regulatory recommendations and nutrition recommendations that are going to be best for everyone? And then
Yeah.
putting the consumer first and then also helping the business. So
I think
yeah.
that's a really good comparison to kind of look at the being like a true partner to your internal business units when you're in
Mhm.
such a role. I love that. Um, what do you think helped you on your
Right.
journey, kind of
Right.
going into
Because
this
with
area?
everything you just
Oh, I think we had a little
yeah,
lag there.
sure.
Go ahead.
Honestly, network. Oh, sorry. Lots of networking, and not being afraid to network. I found this current role through networking. I was always kind of intrigued about it, as I mentioned, but didn't really like my internship didn't have a lot of like solid information on the role or like any like very strong leads at the time. So I kind of just continued to like put myself out there, reach out to folks on LinkedIn or whatnot, and eventually I was able to find a role. And it took time. It definitely didn't happen overnight, but that was, I would say, was the biggest piece, because eventually the more you network, you will be in the right place at the right time,
Yeah,
and some opportunities will open their doors for you.
I think that's great. It's great to hear that. I often encourage people that I'm working with who are wanting to make a transition to, you know, maybe think of companies they're interested in working for and start to develop connections with people working at those companies. So I'm glad that
Mhm.
was part of your journey because I think it is so important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
What are some of the key skills that you learned along this journey?
As I started to allude to before, but like changing the focus from the patient to the business, I think was a key learning for me. To just kind of focus, like working for in a place of healthcare, you're always there to, you know, it's care, it's putting the patient first. And it's really in business, in a corporation, it's a very transferable mindset where it's now you put the business first,
Hmm.
without without trying to, with still putting the nutrition and the science at the forefront. And in my case, in particular, putting the regulations at the forefront. Like there's, regulations, of course, that are very publicly available. Anyone can Google the FDA regulations, and they're viewing to the public. And then what we'll do is we will take them and interpret them regarding the regulations on like nutrition labeling and good manufacturing practices and things like that. And we will translate that to what is best now for the business versus the patient. So I would
Hmm.
say like moving into like a business, definitely was the biggest skill I learned, because I definitely did not have that, to be
Hmm.
fully transparent. I did not have that before the role.
Mm.
And when I was getting hired, my manager was so helpful to help train me, and she said something that was very eye-opening to me. She was like, I can this is all things you can learn on the job. It's really the skill set you bring. And I was like, that really just like changed my mindset with it and really helped me kind of just jump right in.
That's great advice. I think that's so, sometimes we read job descriptions and we're so afraid of not maybe having every single technical skill, but those are the easier things I think sometimes to learn, the technical side. But the communication and
Mm-hmm.
the kind of collaborative skills are sometimes a little bit harder. And something else you said there made me
Mm-hmm.
think, like, it sounds like regulatory is a little bit of art and science. Um, there's obviously a big science component, but it's the interpretation and kind of the art of it. Would you kind of agree with that?
I do, absolutely, because of course we need to follow the regulations. That is
Yeah.
very, very clear. Uh, However, of course, depending on what it is, there can be room for interpretation. So that's really when you get to put the creative hat on, which a lot of folks don't think of regulators as being as creative. And just listen, we're not the design folks or anything like that, but we do have to bring solutions to the business if there are regulations that must be applicable to a certain product. So you definitely can get creative, um, depending on the context, and that's fun. That's if you have a creative, if you like to brainstorm in that way, it can be a very fun role.
Yeah, for sure. That's so cool. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced?
Mm. I would say my biggest adjustment from moving from healthcare to corporate was the mindset. And to explain a little bit more about that, is that so when you're in healthcare, you're also I was working in hospitals both times, and the hospital is just a very different environment than most working environments ever are. It's very critical. It's very fast paced. It's very um, like people's lives are on the line, essentially.
Hmm.
Like you are taking care of who is very sick, and it's just a different kind of responsibility. And that was really my first job after becoming an RD, and even just in my professional career. So it was all I really knew at the time. And then to move to a corporate setting, the emergencies are just very different. No one's life is on the line.
Hmm.
Um, and I personally had an interesting time adjusting to the like I would get like very frantic sometimes requests like very quickly, and at the end of the day I'd be like, this I'm from what I used to do, this is not an emergency. There's no
Right.
emergency, unless there's like mold in a product. That's a different problem.
Mm.
But like most of these are like, this Excel file is not going to like combust, or no one's going to get from this Excel file. So that was definitely like I didn't realize how much I had to unwind my mind
Mm.
um to get to a place I was, and because I was trying to like always hold compassion to for the folks I was working with in corporate, because that's just not their experience, the experience that I previously had in the hospital. And that's totally fair. I'm the one bringing this experience in, but it was
Mhm.
definitely readjust.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. I think I experienced something similar working in retail
Mm,
too. Like
yeah,
the emergencies are quite different, but
right.
and people's interpretation of them for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
if you could give advice to someone who's kind of considering maybe moving into a space like regulatory or kind of a corporate setting, like what would your advice be?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, just really plain and simple, you can do it. You can do it. And you were mentioning this a little bit before, Alexis, but sometimes I feel like folks, especially I'll speak for RDs in this specific instance. If we're trained a certain way in the beginning, which is very clinical focused and very MNT focused, which is very important. I'm not saying that it's not, that education is invaluable to get me to where I am today. But anything outside of that, I feel like sometimes we're like, oh, we can't do that because that's not what we were trained to do. And that wasn't in the scope, at least when I was still doing my internship. That like all these new different types of opportunities were not as available as they are today, I would say. So
Mhm.
you went into healthcare, you went into WIC, you went into maybe the retail, maybe as like the dietitian in the supermarket. And there's just so much more you can do. And I would just tell folks, you can do it. Like you can do anything you want to do. You have so much more of a skill set than you realize. Again, what we were talking about before, a lot of these things can be learned on the job. And as long as you have a passion or a desire, even to just to learn something new, um, don't underestimate what you would bring to a boardroom. Don't underestimate it because it
Mm.
definitely is a different perspective from folks, which at the end of the day might change things. I mean, even a couple of days ago, an example, we were on a call with our colleagues, and we were talking about the labeling of a particular, like a more of a medical type of food for a very specific patient. And all the regulations, of course, were at the forefront. And then with my RD background, I was also able to chime in and be like, well, maybe we do XYZ this way because the patient, this type of patient who's looking for this product, maybe this is the easiest way for them to see it because of what they're dealing with at home or like with managing their condition. And without an RD background, I would not have been able to do that. And I love that I
Mhm.
can bring that side plus the regulations.
Absolutely. I think that's so incredibly valuable to have people with a clinical background in leadership roles within food and health related companies. Like it's one of the things why I started this business around was helping people kind of get empowered to be in those spaces. So I completely agree with you there. There's a lot of transferability and that backbone of knowledge can really be useful in a
Mm,
lot of different settings for sure.
yeah.
What do you have on your plate? I know you have a big personal goal coming up. Any kind of professional development goals on your horizon?
Yes, I would love to work on my blog more. I
Yeah.
I was working I really jumped into it on my first mat leave, and then I went back to work, and I was very lucky to have a good mat leave. And I went back to work, of course, and things priorities shift. So I would love to get back into that space more. Um, just a little bit more about my blog. It's right now it's very much a side passion project at this point. I am certified in intuitive eating as well.
Mm.
I found that as something very interesting. Again, I work in regulatory for my day job, but I did that really more just to learn for myself and my just own as a dietitian career development. Um, so it's a little bit about that. It's a little bit about like other relationships with food, and it's a little bit about food marketing, which I do know from my day job.
Hmm.
In terms of how products are labeled and like what things really like how to interpret what's on the shelf, because the foods on the shelf, they're trying to sell, they're trying to make money,
Hmm. Of
and
course. Yeah.
that's what they're doing. So like just because a food is saying it can do X, XYZ, it doesn't mean it's like the best for you as a person. So it's like I just explore that kind of stuff in the blog. So I would love to pick it up more. Um,
And what's
in
the
that.
website again? Maybe just share with everyone.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's happyeatingrd .com.
Awesome. Yeah,
Mhm.
I love that you have that as a side project. And I think sometimes I hear from dietitians and other health professionals when they're thinking about making a career change, they're a little bit scared that they're going to lose their clinical skills or their passion for nutrition. And I think things like these side projects can be a really good way to keep some of that going if you're maybe working in a space that's a little bit outside of the typical nutrition space. Having something like a blog or even like a very part-time private practice can be really a good way to keep your foot in the door.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also I'm very so happy that we do have to do continuing ed on top of
Hmm.
it. I use that. Of course, there are some like food labeling and the regulations ones that come up every now and then, but I use that as my opportunity to be like, what can I continue to learn about on the side while I'm doing this other nutrition adjacent role.
Yeah, absolutely. So another question is just like, what is something that you do on a weekly basis that kind of sets you up well for your week ahead?
Mm. On the weekends, I completely, at least for one full day, usually a day and a half, I completely unplug from my 9 to 5. Like
Awesome.
I specifically have a work phone. I do not have my work phones on my personal email. That would just, I think, drive my mental space not to a good
Hmm.
place. So I just like put that phone away. I put it away all weekend. I do not think about it. Um, and then I just like I'll admit I'll probably look like on Sunday evening just what I'm walking into, but then I will put it back down again and walk away from it. And even my personal phone, I try to do this during the week, is that I do not have it at my bedside table. I put it somewhere else. I just because we've all been there. Next thing we know, we're like looking at scrolling at something, and it's like 20 minutes later, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is I could be doing something else with my time. So those are the kind of things I kind of just like try to keep clear phone boundaries
Hmm.
for both my personal phone to help me just kind of level set for the week to come.
I think that's a really important one. And I think even like turning off notifications and things like that can be so helpful
Yeah,
with all of that.
I'm a big
I
fan.
yeah, turn off those notifications. That's awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to
Mm-hmm.
share with us?
I would just say that, if you see yourself doing something different, don't be afraid to own it. Um, you are not alone. There's more folks out there than you think who are like-minded and just want to really make their mark in their profession and in their world. And if you like have an itch or a calling, like don't, lean into it and see where it can take you. Um, I, as someone who felt that way, um, I always like just knew I would be doing something different than a more traditional dietetic role. Maybe it was my just being a non-traditional RD to begin with. Um, but I just always had that calling, and I ended up in a place I am today that I'm very happy to say. It's also still a journey continuing. Who knows where we'll go from
Yeah.
here. Um, but knowing that there are so many opportunities for dietitians and that it's more and more prevalent than ever. I mean, social media alone, a lot of the content I review, a good portion of it is by RDs, and it just makes me smile because it's just nice to see all the different things you can do, and you really can, if you have a goal, you can get there.
Hmm. I love that. I think that's great advice. And I think too, like realizing that you can go back and forth too. Like you can
Right.
go pivot to a new direction in a non-traditional space. And remember that if you do miss the clinical or you miss, one-on-one interactions, like bring it into your life in another way, or you can always go back. So I feel like it's not linear. And I think it's just good to really be open and explore all the opportunities that are out there.
Yeah. And always, never think you're like, oh, I only gonna want to do one thing forever. I mean, when I was in counseling, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't. And when I realized I had this opportunity to move out of it, I was like, I can't wait to not chart anymore. And like, I'll keep all those documents and everything like that and talk to patients all day. And I'm in my new role now, and I'm very happy in this role. But every once in a while, I go, it'd be nice to have a patient now and then,
Yeah.
and just like I'm like and like doing that work and like even charting. I was like, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was.
Yeah, for
So it's
sure.
not all. You can make the career what you want it to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes we think the grass is always greener, but we can kind of have
Mm.
things we love about the different roles and things we don't love. And I think that's just part of your career sometimes. So,
Oh, totally, totally. I thought it was going to take me much longer networking to get where I am today. Um, it I, and to give some context to that amount of time, I probably networked for about 2 years before I got into my role. I was expecting it to be a much longer game, and then you get there and you're like, oh, okay. You're like now, and then you really always, even when you get to a goal, you're like, now what?
yeah.
And eventually, now what always creeps up, and that's just what's so great about this field is that it can still be so versatile.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Do you have anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Not no, I think that was it. It was just so great to talk to you today, Alexis. And I think this is such a great premise for a podcast to just show folks that there's a lot of different avenues you could take. So I'm just happy to be part of it.
Oh, thank you very much. So, all right, I'll do my little wrap up. So I hope everyone enjoyed hearing from Gabrielle and you're feeling inspired. If you do want to engage more with this community, I have a free Facebook group. It's called Business Skills for Health Professionals Community, and I'll link it in the show notes. We also offer our Beyond Clinical Career Transition Program, which is really support for you in a one-on-one capacity to make these career transitions. So I'll link that in the show notes as well, but you can find out more by visiting our website, which is www.bizskillsforhps.com. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Take care.